This is happiness, to be everything at once. Be unblinded, be unlearned, be unbridled and unburned.
Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of Mood Prep. My name is Dave Nixon, and today I'm going to share something that kind of popped up twice over the weekend, which was, it's kind of fitting. It's interesting that when I remember hearing a quote years ago that was like, making sure I don't paraphrase it, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And this is I suppose has new meaning as I've gotten older, as I start to understand what being ready means for me, at least, and the rest of that. And so as soon as I'm ready to learn something, the information is always there. The information that you need, the information that I need to be able to solve the problem that we have, so to speak, is already there. We have to be open enough to be able to actually see it. And so in that case, I'm ready to see it, it'll arise. That's where I really get out of that quote. And I think more often than not, when something is relevant to me, my brain, and I see this common for a lot of people, and I understand some people might call this the RAS, reticular activating system, and that's basically an example of when you start to go, I really want to get this car, and then you start seeing the car everywhere, and you're like, oh my god, it's already been there. It's just now it's in your RAS, right? That's for those of you that don't know. So I thought maybe there's something in this for me, and you guys might laugh, you might find it funny, but there's two quotes I came across that were relatively similar. And of course, I, like myself and many other humans, are still always unfolding and unpacking my own stuff, my own frustrations. I get caught catching myself, what I refer to as metastating myself into a trance. And what that means is, and I'm not like eyes rolled back in their head, frothing in their mouth or something like that, like metastating, so making a state about a state, right? That's what metastating means. So getting anxious about being anxious, right? That's an example. Being happy about being happy. But also thinking is another variation of that. And then trancing is simply just like global pervasive language and descriptions of what's going on in your internal world that trances you into a state that's unresourceful, etc. So when I say metastating into a trance, that's what I'm referring to. We can do it when we, in both like positive or negative lights, if you want to use those terms. But more often than not, like I said, I find myself still going through this process, still catching myself, all that sort of stuff, all the stuff that I teach, I'm still going through that unfolding as well. And so the first of these two quotes reads, and it's by Sylvester McNutt. That's a great surname. One of the most harmful activities you can do is hold a grudge against people. People make mistakes. We hurt each other indirectly. Be mature enough to tactfully talk about the problem. Be wise enough to hear the other person's perspective and be strong enough to let it go. Now, this is really interesting. I don't think I wouldn't say that I'm holding a grudge, but I definitely have parts of me that have energy towards certain people or memories or behaviors or something along those lines, that that's got to do with me. That's not to do with any of them. This is the whole idea of like not hating. You can't hate anyone. You can only hate your experience of them, right? Because you don't know all of them. You can't know all of them. So that hate exists within. But same with love, same with everything. And so, like, I still go through that process of not necessarily holding a grudge, but having that emotional energy towards something, whether it be a behavior, and I got to be like, fuck, what's that on behalf of? Like, what's why? Hence why it's a projection, because it's on the inside. The anger it's always a projection. It's on the inside. Something's going on the inside, and when we can truly understand that somebody else's anger towards us isn't about us, then we can start to really see and keep calm, but see the whole process, and support them through that as well. I found it really interesting, but I think a key thing here is you can hold as a grudge against people. People make mistakes. Now, you can almost put yourself in this fold. Hey, like, how many of us are walking around with grudges against ourselves? about things, decisions that we didn't make or decisions that we did make, people we let down, meaning maybe ourselves once again, but all these sorts of things, like how many people do you walk past in the street that hold a grudge against ourselves? And, is it mature to maybe see a different perspective? Maybe yours is a perspective rather than the perspective you hold. It's a perspective that you've chosen to hold by default, as opposed to attempting to see the perspective of your behaviors, thoughts, actions, whatever, in a different light. Be mature enough to tactfully talk about the problem. Because what's a problem for you may not be a problem for somebody else, right? And so that's where it's like, well, if we wait for other people to bring up the problem, just hoping that's what they're going to do, I mean, that's passive. And this is the interesting thing, is like how you do one thing is often how you do everything. And there's a whole fucking podcast in that. But what that means is that if you're passive there, it's like you're probably passive in many other areas of your life. And being able to see that, it's like, well, what's that on behalf of? And maybe, there's a potential that it could be with avoiding conflict, not realizing that the best way to actually create conflict is to try to avoid it. It's like conflict and confrontation is actually just a normal part of our lives that we get to grow from every single day. So when we avoid that, maybe we're avoiding growth. And it's something worth sort of paying attention to and looking at, especially if you've scored the old Type 9 on the Enneagram. So that was that quote, right? And obviously be wise enough to hear the other person's perspective and be strong enough to let it go. Is that letting go of the other person's perspective or letting go of the grudge? I'm assuming it would be on the grudge, but it's sort of like these things can have us. I just have hate for that person. It's like, no, that hate has you. And it's probably not that person. That person's probably what's called an object relation, as in the relation that you have with that person as an object, right? It's very, very interesting. So, and then I just saw a post by a guy called Dane Thomas. Some of you may follow him. I follow some of his stuff. Some of it I'm not really understanding or following, or probably wanting to understand. I don't know, but some of it I don't mind. And this is pretty simple. I have this crazy idea. I have many crazy ideas, but that's how the post goes. When we have a problem with someone, if we care about them, we can name it and clear the air. If we don't care about them, we can let it go and move on. Is there something I'm missing? And in short, maybe there isn't something that he's missing. Maybe it is that simple. Maybe it's we choose to complicate it because of shoulds and all these other things and reasons that we believe people should be doing or behaving in a particular way, which once again is a projection of our own values. It's so fascinating how often people will be like, well, what would you do then in that circumstance? So this is what, what do you think I'd do? Or like, what kind of person does that? It's like, all that's just projection judgment. It's all sorts of rubbish that's just holding you back from actually seeing it from different perspectives rather than holding the perspective. And the first thing about all of it, though, is that we have to be able to see it. And sometimes that's really fucking ugly. Sometimes seeing those parts of us is some of the hardest shit because... Fuck, I know people, hey, maybe this is me somewhere. Maybe I'll listen back to this podcast in a couple of years and laugh because of how blind I am in a certain area in my life. There's a possibility, of course, that are so blind to their own shadows, psychological shadows, that seeing it would actually shatter the idea that they're a good person. It's like having a dark side to your personality doesn't make you a bad person. It's not either or. It will always will be and always has been an integration. Go back and listen to my 100th episode if you haven't already about the two wolves, and it's about an old Cherokee tale about the evil wolf and the good wolf, and which one do you feed? It's like, well, you feed both. You feed both because if you're starving a wolf, that thing you can't trust. It'll fucking bite you when you're not looking. You feed both, you look after both, and you become both, an integration of both. And this is the beauty of the world, which is a whole nother podcast on its own. So team, I'm out. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you haven't already, jump on Facebook, search Mood Prep Online, jump in the group. I do have the Mood Prep Intensive Weekender coming up on the 9th and 10th of March. I would love to see you there if you're interested in learning more about all this sort of stuff. Otherwise, That's it. I'm done. Until tomorrow, peace and pizza, kick today in the dick, slay the dragon. I'll see you soon.
to be everything at once. Be unblinded, be unlearned, be unbridled and unburned.